Hey crafters! Today we're going to use the Lawn Fawn camera to make a fun interactive thank you card that's set underwater. Hope you enjoy! So I'm starting with a 5 by 7 inch piece of card. This way it will be big enough for the camera, and then there'll be a bit of a scene around the outside. So using my Distress Oxides, I started with Speckled Egg in the middle, and then some cracked Pistachio, and lastly Mermaid Lagoon. I didn't worry too much about blending in the middle of the card because the camera will be covering most of that, and I concentrated my blending around the edges to make a beautiful ocean background. These colors are just perfect for this. So I used 3 different Lawn Fawn stamp sets for this card. The main one is from the I Like You a Lotl stamp set. I used both the creature and the underwater plant. And then I wanted some big rocks on the background to make it look like the bottom of the ocean. And I found these in the Mermaid for You stamp set. And lastly, I wanted some fish and creatures in the ocean as well. So I found those in the Ocean Shelfie set. These cute little goldfish that are facing the camera and the jellyfish are just perfect for my card. So I used the die, the Polaroid die, and just taped the back with some post-it note tape so it was one piece. And then I put my main image from I Like You a Lotl, one of the axolotls on there. And then I stamped him on post-it note paper and cut him out just so that I could create a quick mask for it. Then I used one of the rocks behind him and some of the ocean plants and made a nice little scene here. And by masking off the main creature, it gives the image a bit more depth. And I also added some little bubbles there. So then I just colored this in with some Copics, and I'm just going to speed through this. Otherwise, this video would be too long. But I will show you the highlights of this. So after coloring in the rock, I colored in the axolotl, and I made him a nice turquoise color. And then I did the background with Copics as well. And when you're doing a background with Copics, the first layer looks kind of scratchy, so you need to do more than one layer just to make it look nice and even. After using 2 layers and adding a little ocean floor there, I use my white gel pen for highlights, and that makes all the difference. Isn't that cute? Then I added my sentiment from the same stamp set and moved on to my camera. So the main part of the camera is blended with some Tattered Rose, which is just a beautiful Distress Oxide color. If you've never tried it, I recommend using it. And then I wanted it to be a bit of a contrast from the background. So I used some picked raspberry around the outside. Usually picked raspberry is very vibrant, but when you combine it with the Tattered Rose, you get a very subtle pink, as you'll see shortly. So after putting the picked raspberry around the outside and blending it out, you'll see it softens that pink and gives it a nice pinky glow, which is perfect for the camera. Now I wanted to add some stamp details to the camera. So I did use a 4th stamp set for this card, but you could replace this with other images if you prefer. I used these hearts from the Let's Toast stamp set, and I decided to stamp them in VersaFine Clair today. So I used Purple Delight, and this is a beautiful light pinky purple. And then I used some Monarch as well, which is a darker purple. So I used the big heart and then the little heart, and I just staggered these around the camera. And I thought this gave the camera a really cutesy look, which was perfect and just what I was going for. using the VersaFine Clair on the Distress Oxide gives you a bit of a different effect, which I was very pleased with. You could always add images of fish on your camera if you prefer, but I like the idea of using hearts on a thank you card, and I was very pleased with the way this camera turned out. So once that's finished, I'm going to die cut the other pieces that I need to put this card together. And most of these will be white, except for the main tab, which I will use my Mermaid Lagoon on so that it matches the background of the card as well. Then I'm going to roughly put my camera where I want it to be and use some post-it tape so that I can adhere the little tab piece onto my background. And I'll also need the slit piece as well. Then I'll die cut these. And then I will add in my pull tab mechanism at the back of the card. And I like to use white PVA wet glue to adhere the holder piece for this, but you could always use double-sided tape if you prefer. Just with the glue, you need to hold it for a few seconds for it to set properly. But then your mechanism will be nice and strong. So it's up to you, personal preference. So I'm just going to test my mechanism and make sure it works. And then once it's nice and smooth and moving well, I can trim the excess bit off the top and add in my arrow so that the recipient knows it's an interactive card. So now my pull tab mechanism is complete and I can add in my other pieces. So to make this look like an underwater camera, I used a bit of acetate, which I've also die cut with the camera die. And I'm just lining it up here so that I can add the slit on the top of my acetate camera in the same place as my pink camera. And you'll see that I've used post-it tape to adhere the pieces onto the camera. So I used the picked raspberry for the pink ring, and the purple lens cap is done with Dusty Concord Distress Oxide. And I wanted to make sure that the clear acetate camera adhered to my pink camera, and I didn't want the glue to show. So what I used is some Nuvo drops, and I put these on all the hearts and the lens cap, or the lens ring and the flash. And then when I put my clear camera on top and left it to dry, the Nuvo drops acted as a bit of adhesive. So it's a very clever way to have your acetate camera on top without using any messy glue that will show. So once I lined up the acetate camera onto the pink camera, I put something heavy on top of it and left it for about half an hour until it was adhered together. So now for my background, I decided that I wanted to add some sand on the bottom to make it look more like an ocean. So I used some Distress Grit Paste and a bit of Vintage Photo Distress Oxide and just combine those together. You could always use Distress ink or regular ink if you prefer. And then I just used my spreader to put the Distress Grit Paste on the bottom of the card. And you can leave it smooth like this, but I prefer adding a texture. So just patting with the spatula there will give a nice sand-like texture, which I like, and it just looks gorgeous to me. So I left that to dry completely. And then my favorite bit, we'll get to put the card together. So I've got all my pieces here. I've got the camera and the Polaroid picture, and I've got my axolotls, my rocks and my plants all colored with Copic markers. And then I also have some cute little fish that are facing the camera. I just love these. And my jellyfish, which I colored and then covered with the Nuvo drops, so they're a little sparkly. So I'm going to use double-sided tape on the tab here, and then I will remove the backing and adhere my Polaroid picture. Then once my Polaroid picture is secured on the tab, I will test my mechanism to make sure it still works, and then I will put my camera on. On the back of my camera, I have some 3mm foam tabs. And just if you're using acetate like this, make sure that your Polaroid picture goes through both of the cameras. And I'm just lining it up and making sure that it still works and that none of the foam tabs are in the wrong place. Now I wanted to adhere a rock right onto the grit paste, which is dry now. And this can be a little bit tricky, so I used a foam pad as well as liquid glue or PVA glue just to make sure it was secure. And then I just dispersed the rocks throughout the rest of the background and added my underwater plants, my axolotl, my fish, and my jellyfish. I just love this background. So cute. So then I'm just going to put the rest of the images around the outside of the camera to fill up my background until I'm happy with the way that it looks. And I used liquid glue to adhere all these cute little critters. So the last thing this card needs is some bubbles. And for this, I used the Ranger Glossy Accents. And I just dispersed this throughout the card randomly around my critters, which is a perfect finishing touch. This takes a good half hour to dry, depending on the size of your air bubbles. So I made sure it was completely dry before adding onto my card base. As I mentioned, this is a 5x7" card. So I used a 5x7" card base, and because of the mechanism on the back of the card, I used foam tape to adhere this to my card base so that the interactive mechanism could still work. And for the inside sentiment, I'm just going to use a simple sentiment, Hugs, from the Ocean Shelfie stamp set. And I'll add some of my leftover stamped in colored images. Then I'll just test my mechanism one last time to make sure it works. Just gorgeous. Thanks for watching. I hope this inspired you. Be sure to subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. Have a crafty day!